have been, frankly, putting this video off. Mainly because I don't know what possessed me this year to not update my Goodreads, but I just didn't update my Goodreads for a good like 8 months. So, but we are moving into the last month of 2023, and I knew I wanted to sit down, look at the books I hadn't added to my Goodreads, update my Goodreads, and then figure out where I am with my reading goals for the year 2023. I knew I was being ambitious at the beginning of the year when I set this goal, and now that I've looked at this again, I can confirm I was ambitious. That ambition has not left me because I'm gonna carry that on for the rest of the year in December. I have read, according to Goodreads, 24 books out of my 50 book goal. I'm not gonna lie, I feel like I'm missing some books because like I said, I just didn't update my Goodreads, so I feel like I lost track. I'm gonna see how many books I can read in December. Basically, according to my dumb math, that means I'm basically reading a book every day up until Christmas. I'm gonna see what happens. Before we even get started into reading books this month, let's go ahead and go back and I'm gonna go over some of the books that I read, kind of do a reading wrap up. I know a lot of these I've talked about in some previous reading blogs that I've recently updated, so let's just go ahead and go through the piles. I know you can't see it, but I've got like piles of books here in front of me, including my Kindle, so let's just go through my quick thoughts since we're sitting here and having a little chit chat anyways. In no particular order, because honestly, I don't remember when I finished these books. I just know it was somewhere over the course of this past year. How do we know we're doing it right? I talked about this in a reading vlog. I enjoyed it enough. I gave it a 3.5 stars. Soul Boom. I also gave this, I think, a 3.75 or a 3.5. 3.5 stars. I actually enjoyed this one. I would say pretty much on par with these ones. You guys are gonna see a common theme. Evidently in 2023, I was into self-improvement, which is pretty standard for me. But yeah, Soul Boom. This one's gonna throw you guys for a bit of a loop, and this was actually a recommendation from one of my friends IRL, and it is Expecting Better. Why the conventional pregnancy wisdom is wrong and what you really need to know. No, I am not pregnant, nor do I plan on getting pregnant anytime soon. But the reason that I was drawn to this book was because I'm in that age where pregnancy and having children is a very real thing that I'm facing. I'm in my 30s now, and so it's very intimidating, and reading stuff like this makes me feel better, or I should just say educating myself on topics that I'm stressed out about or nervous about makes me feel like I have more control. And so this was my attempt at doing that. And while I will say, I know that this book is pretty controversial because it has a lot to do with medicalness and also pregnancy, which a lot of times can be a controversial topic in its own right because a lot of people have different schools of thought when it comes to different pregnancy related topics. I felt like this was pretty good at making me feel better about some of the different things I was intimidated about. Yeah, I wouldn't say this is like the end all be all resource for that topic, but it is a kind of good alternative take on some of the things you hear about, like caffeine intake, alcohol intake, which I honestly did not agree with this book necessarily on. Listeria, and you know, can you eat lunch meat? Can you eat fish? By the way, don't look at my Goodreads. It's kind of a mess. Again, I didn't remember like dates specifically, so I just put literally the date that I'm filming this, so you'll know which books I like added last minute. I gave this a 4 stars. I also gave this book a 4 stars, and this is actually more in the realm of child care and raising children. The reason I like this is because it made different types of parenting seem much more approachable. The whole idea behind this book is she enters into different indigenous cultures and different cultures around the world where they're known to have children that are helpful and contribute societally to the tribe, and how other elder members of a tribe can help raise children. And so I like this. I think a lot of it felt a little bit like, you do this and then this will happen, but again, it made me feel better, so I'm just gonna emotionally give it a 4 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed it. I thought it was a pretty good read, and if you guys are having kids or if you have kids already, I don't see the harm in reading stuff like this. Speaking of relationships, this was actually a book that I read with my husband. This is The Love Prescription. It's by John Gottman and Julie Schwartz Gottman. Gottmans are known psychologists that are very prominent in this field. So this book I picked up because I started listening to it and felt like it was a pretty digestible book for a couple to read together. So what me and my husband ended up doing was I let him take the lead on this book besides me picking the book, and I told him basically just read as many pages as you want and make notes on what you think of them, and then I'll come back in behind you and read what you read and we can have a conversation about it. And I feel like it was a really good way to jump us into some conversations that maybe we didn't know how to have or didn't know we needed to have. And I like this because it was a tiny short little book, so for someone like my husband, he actually does read, but he's not reading a ton of like books, like relationship books or self-help books or anything like that. So this was a digestible book for him. And you know, a lot of times if your partner does not read, I feel like being like, hey, this is a small book, just read a couple pages, 5 pages a day, and we'll go through it together. I felt like there were a lot of good things in here, and we kind of joke around with some of the terms in here, like mapping. Like when I'm telling him a story, I'm like, see, I'm mapping for you, babe, I'm mapping. So if you read this book, you'll get what I'm saying. But I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. It's Britney, bitch. I, like everyone else, read the Britney Spirits book, and I'm actually doing a video on this, so I'm not gonna get too much into it because I'm doing more of like a thought piece on it, which I don't usually do, but I'm trying to get more into on this YouTube channel. I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed reading it. I felt like the shadow writer did a really good job writing in her tone of voice. So as I was reading this, I really felt like it was Britney speaking through the words. For it being like a pop culture book, I found this oddly powerful and eye-opening in saying this is probably happening to a lot of people in pop culture, unfortunately. And so I think, if anything, Britney Spears' life is really tragic, but hopefully her story can illuminate some other people's stories, if anything. But yeah, this was the amount of trauma this girl went through, wild. I read this book. I don't know what possessed me to read this book. I got into like a period where I was reading a lot of like autobiography or biography books, and this was one of them. Mommy Dearest is one of the darker books you can read because it was such a popular and well-loved actress of the time, and Christina Crawford having published it right after her mother's death, and also was just recently written out of her will. This is such a fascinating book, especially when you look at the context of the time and you look at it through the lens of what we know today about child abuse and just you know, abusive families in general and just relationship dynamics. Again, wild. Okay, so this was kind of a random read for me. This was a book I just randomly picked off of Book Outlet, I think. So I know, I got a little marker on there. This is called Unmasked, My Life Solving America's Cold Cases by Paul Holes. Now, this is actually a really interesting read personally for me because I had read Michelle McNamara's book before this, which the name escapes me, but I'll put the title of the book up here. I talked about it on my channel, I believe, last year. In that book, Michelle McNamara was basically talking about her obsession with the Golden State Killer and how genetic testing basically exposed who this killer was after his rampant serial murdering in the state of California. And Paul Holes was actually someone who worked very closely on the case. Now, what's crazy is Michelle McNamara's book definitely got more publicity on this topic because she had the whole series, I think it was on HBO or one of those like movie channels, the premium channels, and I watched both that series and read the book, and I didn't care for either one of them. And I remember at the time with Michelle McNamara's book, I think it was because I was going into that book thinking it was going to be more about the Golden State Killer, and it was more about her relationship and her life obsession with this serial killer. So for me, when I went and expecting something else, I didn't enjoy it as much. I actually like this book much better. I mean, it wasn't like an amazing book, but I don't know, I felt like I like this book better. I don't even know how to explain it, but I did. Oop, we're getting into some more self-help books. Okay, The Courage to Be Disliked. I finished this one. I gave it a 2 stars. I talked about this in a recent reading vlog I did. I didn't like this. I wish this spoke to me like it spoke to other people. And the reason I picked this up was because I saw people on TikTok talking about how this was a life-changing book for them. I don't know if I was reading it and not absorbing what it should have been giving me at the time, because it is written in a little bit of a different format. It's basically like a master and a student having a conversation with one another. I don't know. I read a lot of self-help books, obviously, and this one just didn't speak to me the way it spoke to other people. This was another book that was like this. Get out of your head. Stop being this spiral of toxic thoughts. I literally thought that that was what this book was going to be, and I felt misled by the title. This was a faith-based book, which again, I'm not opposed to faith-based books. In fact, I love faith-based books, but this just, because I was like thinking this was going to be more of a psychological approach to it, like therapy, this wasn't it. And I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars, so. And what was awkward was I took this into a restaurant. I ate by myself one day. So I was sitting in a restaurant reading this book. A lot of the servers, I don't know why, there was like 3 different servers serving my table. Every person was like, what book are you reading? And I had to like read the title out, and I felt so cheesy being like, oh, get out of your head, stopping the spiral of toxic thoughts. And then they were like, is it good? And I was like, no, it's not. Since we're talking about self-help, I read on my Kindle was Lighter by Young Pueblo. When I look back at that book, I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars, by the way. I kind of wish I read it with the workbook because I think I might have absorbed more from it. But I felt like it was a very good centering book. I read this, I want to say in like April or May, so I don't remember specifically what parts resonated with me or not. I just remember kind of walking away from it being like, all right. Why Fish Don't Exist by Lula Miller. This has been on my TBR for years, and I actually purchased this book probably a year ago or 2 from Goodreads, from Book Outlet, and I just never got around to reading it. And then I just picked it up because I was in the middle of reading like 5 other books, and I was like, why not start another one? And it was like relatively short, and I just really liked how the author took you on a ride with this hero, personal hero that she'd had, who's David Starr Jordan, who's basically like a famous taxonomist. So he was basically categorizing fish. And then through a series of events, he basically loses his life work, but then like resurrects it from the dead. And then you're like, yay. And then you find out he's a terrible person. And then it's kind of like the fall from grace that the author has with seeing her hero that she looks up to and learning more about him, be like, wow, he was like a terrible person. So yeah, so it's kind of like appreciating the art and the artist and kind of her experience going through the motions of that. So I really enjoyed this book. Definitely recommend if you're thinking about it. I really liked it. It got me back onto a reading kick because I enjoyed it so much. The Mountain Is You. So I left off one of my reading vlogs talking about how I wanted to read through this more slowly and finish it on my own pace versus just like burning through it to finish it. And I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. I really like this book. Again, this is one of those books I kind of want to pick up the workbook and reread it. If you're looking for a self-help book that feels like a therapy session, I'd recommend this one because it really makes you sit down and think about why you're having certain emotions and why you're feeling certain ways about things, and really looking through maybe some habits you started to form around those feelings or emotions or actions. And what I will say about this book is it's actually a hard read because you're doing the work. If you've ever been to a therapy session and you leave feeling drained because you're processing through emotions versus just like brushing them away, that's what it felt like when reading this book. So definitely good. I will say it's kind of funny because this is a Thought Catalog book, like published by Thought Catalog. There's grammatical issues in here, like, and there's one right there on the back of the book, and I'm like, LOL, adjusting. Do we see this? Look at that. Thought Catalog, aren't they one of those like publishing houses where you can like self-publish? You guys need a better editor. Cause like it's a shame because I do think that this is a good book, but it's riddled with grammatical errors, guys. I think that's pretty much it. I'm looking at the books that I've updated. So that's where we're starting off with for the month of December. We're gonna see how strong we can finish off 2023. If I'm gonna hit that goal, I actually have 26 books to read, so. And also subscribe if you guys wanna see how I do in the month of December with this reading challenge. We'll find out.